Good evening and welcome to a primary debate between Republican candidates in Utah's 3rd Congressional District race. I'm Jennifer Napier Pierce, editor of the Salt Lake Tribune, here with Jason Perry, director of the Hinckley Institute of Politics at the University of Utah. We're on Facebook Live from the Utah County Convention Center in downtown Provo. Pardon me, Utah Valley Convention Center in downtown Provo. Tonight, we will hear from the Republicans in this race, Tanner Ainge, John Curtis, and Chris Herod. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time tonight. We've got plenty of questions. We want the candidates to get to your questions as well, so you can send those questions on Twitter to the hashtag UT3Debate. That's UT3, the number 3 debate, and we'll get to as many of those as we can.
Thank you, Jennifer. Glad to have you all here, and the candidates as well. The candidates have all agreed to a format giving 90 seconds for an initial response to a question, with 30 seconds for a rebuttal on a rotating basis. Before we get to the questions, because we're going to jump right into this thing, we will have each candidate give a 2-minute opening statement. Moments ago, the candidates drew numbers to determine who would go first, and Tanner Ainge drew first to give the first opening statement. He'll be followed by Chris Herod and then John Curtis. This is a 2-minute opening statement, starting with Tanner Ainge.
Thank you, and thanks for everyone who's here and everyone who's taking the time to watch this online. Before we jump into the debate, I'd love to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm running. I have always been a person of action, and I've always taken an early start in life. In high school, I graduated early. I finished BYU ahead of schedule, and I completed my law degree in half the time it traditionally takes. When I was 17, I already knew the girl I was going to marry. And 2 days after I returned home from a mission in West Africa, we were engaged. Heidi is still my best friend and an incredible mother to our 5 children. In my business career, I've also continued at an accelerated pace. Over the course of the last decade, I've been involved with hundreds of transactions, ranging from billion-dollar investments to partnering with small businesses and entrepreneurs. They have trusted me to jump into their business, roll up my sleeves, and go through their financial statements, their legal documents, and trends in their industry to identify areas for improvement, waste to cut, and hidden risks that they weren't aware of. They trusted me to take action. Congress is the exact opposite. Inaction has become the standard operating procedure. They seem to never act until crisis is already at the doorstep. Problems they are aware of, they seem content, letting those come on another day, or on the next guy's watch, or even worse, onto the next generation. I will be a different type of leader. I will look far into the future, see the problems that will face us, and begin acting today to resolve them. Nobody on this stage, or nobody in Congress, will work harder than me to represent this district. I hope that during the course of this debate I can earn your trust, and I can earn your vote, and the privilege to serve this district in the U.S. House of Representatives.
2-minute opening statement from Chris Herod.
Well, thank you very much for spending your Friday evening here. I know it's a sacrifice for you, so thank you very much for coming. I'd like to just tell you a little bit about myself. I moved to Provo, or my family moved to Provo when I was 7, so I think that makes me a native Utahn. My father grew up, when I was 2 years old, my father went to Vietnam, and when he came back, fortunately he did come back, he taught us how fortunate we are to be Americans. So I grew up in a patriotic family. One of the founders of the Freedom Festival lived next door, and so I grew up getting passes to go and meeting interesting people that had sacrificed greatly for freedom. I met Victor Belenko, a Russian MiG pilot that had flown with his countrymen trying to shoot him down. And then at the age of 16, between my junior and senior year in high school, I had a friend that was going on a BYU study abroad. And so I applied to BYU, got a presidential scholarship, and then spent 6 months studying in Europe and the Middle East. And I had 2 experiences there that I'll never forget. One was seeing the Iron Curtain for the very first time, and it was iron, and it was brutal in its appearance. I also noticed as we were going across to Hungary that the machine guns were pointed inward. And I learned something about a system that has to force its people to stay. And then I had experience going to West Berlin. As the train pulled into West Berlin, they ran dogs underneath the trains, and I quickly learned that you don't take pictures of them running dogs underneath the train. But I realized that America was very unique. Later on, I graduated from BYU with an international relations degree and a master's in organizational behavior. I took a teaching job in the former Soviet Union where I met my beautiful wife. And I'll talk more about our experiences there. But I'm grateful. I look forward to a lively debate. Thank you.
A 2-minute opening statement by John Curtis.
Thank you. Good evening. I must admit I smiled when I learned this debate was in my city. Welcome to Provo. Welcome to the city that was just ranked the second best in the entire United States as the best managed city. Welcome to the city where 84% of our residents say they give a good to excellent value for their tax dollar. Welcome to the city where we're doing more with less. We have fewer employees than we did 8 years ago per 1,000 employees. And our property tax rate is lower than it was 8 years ago. Welcome to the city where Sue and I 20 years ago came to pursue my entrepreneurial dream. With my partners here in Provo, we started a company. We built a company into an international success using principles of hard work, doing more with less, and doing it with low debt. And today, I'm proud to say that law enforcement officers and military personnel around the world are safer because they train on equipment made right here in Provo. Welcome to the city of Google Fiber. Welcome to the city of the best recreation center in the world. Welcome to the city with scheduled service, the highest volunteer rate in the entire United States. And welcome to the city that is known around the state and the country as the best place to start a business. Welcome to the city that the Davie Herald described as the city enjoying the greatest economic development in its history. And welcome to the city where I just celebrated my 35th wedding anniversary to what I think is the best wife in the world. And welcome to the city where after looking around the country, Sue and I decided to raise our family here. Tonight, I hope to show you that I'm not only right on the issues, but that I'm a leader. Somebody that actually gets things done. Somebody who actually doesn't just do the talk. Somebody that cuts budgets, is transparent, effective, and respects the taxpayers. I've done it in my business. We did it at the city of Provo, and I'm ready to do it in Congress. Thank you.
Questions. Again, each of you will have 90 seconds to answer with an optional 30 seconds to rebut. The first question deals with health care. Republican efforts to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act have failed. After last night's vote, what is the path forward for health care reform? Is there a way to contain health care costs while expanding coverage for Americans who need it? And according to our drawing, Tanner H., you will go first. 90 seconds.
Thank you. It's incredibly unfortunate that we have not yet been able to repeal and replace Obamacare. It has been a complete and total failure. We were promised that we would be able to keep our same doctors, but that didn't happen. We were promised we could keep the same plan, but that didn't happen either. We were promised that costs would go down, but instead our premiums have skyrocketed. I think that our path forward, we need to have more choice and competition and free market forces into the healthcare system. One great way of doing that, which was part of the House bill that was passed, is allowing for health savings accounts to play a bigger role. What this essentially is we can take money and put it into an individual account, tax-free, and then we can purchase healthcare similar to the way we purchase everything else in our life. Right now it's too difficult because we don't understand the exact cost of everything at the doctor's office. And they're not set up to market to us because they're used to traditional co-pays and third-party payer systems. But if we get more people into the health savings account pool, then that will transform the system and it will reduce costs and we can stop wasting so much money on healthcare. So one solution is to increase the amount that people are allowed to contribute to health savings accounts. And also to let people buy their insurance premiums with their HSA accounts. And this is just one way that we can start introducing more choice, competition, and cost reduction into healthcare.
It's You have 90 seconds.
The vote last night shows why this debate is so important. Over 60 times Congress voted when it didn't count to repeal Obamacare. And then when it did count, we couldn't get the votes. We had 3 Republican senators that campaigned and campaigned on repealing Obamacare. And yet when given the opportunity, they did not repeal. And so that's why this debate is so important. I'm the one in this, of the 3 candidates that has the conservative record. I have a history of actually doing what I said I was going to do. For me, I've been very clear on Obamacare. My wife grew up in the Soviet Union. She literally bears the scars of socialized medicine. That system simply does not work. And so what we need to do is come back to the free market. As Tanner said, I'm a big believer in having catastrophic plans and having health saving accounts. Unfortunately, right now, I'm not even able to have that option. But it's also important that we let people know that socialized medicine is not the panacea that everybody thinks that it is. If you want to have plenty of horror stories, I can give you horror story after horror story, having lived in the former Soviet Union. And so, again, we need health savings accounts with catastrophic plans, and then keep people to have freedom to have choice. Thank you.
Thank you. John Curtis, 90 seconds.
Thank you. Have you ever had a nightmare that just keeps reoccurring the same thing over and over again? 7 years ago, we saw what happened when one party tried to ram through Congress a bill that was ill-conceived, didn't have transparency, and we were told that we had to pass it and then we could figure it out. 7 years later, as Republicans, we moved too quickly. We rammed a bill, we tried to ram a bill through without transparency, without bringing the best people to the table to solve all the problems. I feel like Humpty Dumpty has fallen off the wall, and we have to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. But we have to admit, it's not just Obamacare, it's decades and decades and decades of government intervention that have caused the problems that we're experiencing in healthcare today. I believe, I have hope, and I'm optimistic that not only can we repeal Obamacare, but we can replace it with something that's finally good for the American people. It's time to stop caring about large insurance companies, politicians, and start caring about the American people. There are so many good ideas out there. Healthcare cost-sharing pools are something that we need to explore. Direct premium care is something that we need to explore. HSAs, we can do so much better. Health courts. I look forward to having an opportunity to take all these ideas and work with people to find something that's finally good for the American people. Thank you.
30 seconds for rebuttal. You all seem pretty much in line with health savings accounts and a range of private free market options. I'm just wondering how you do this in a practical way. You need Democrats, so how do you get your colleagues on board who are on the other side of the aisle? 30 seconds, and Tanner Ainge, you go first.
One way to do this is to focus on states' rights. We need to let, states' rights should not be a partisan issue. If Utah wants to do it the great way that Utah would, with conservative values, fantastic. And if Vermont wants to do it their own way, then that's great too. And in our state, there's so many opportunities. We have had plans before that would have been way better than the Obamacare system if the federal government hadn't got involved. We have to return power to the states.
One of the best ways to do that is to actually allow the states. In 2009, I started a state sovereignty movement here in the state of Utah, the 10th Amendment. The only way, because Utahns know how to take care of Utah best, we already had a plan that we took care of those that in the state of Utah that weren't insurable. We had a high risk pool for them. And so many of the things that you try to do on a federal level, it's done much better on the state. In the state of Utah, we actually solved many of the problems that now, and we're not allowed to solve them. So it needs to come back to the states. Thank you.
Thank you. John Curtis.
I too would like to see the states given more autonomy. But let's face it, Congress has skipped a number of steps. And they can fix this by going back to the drawing board, taking this to committees where they can work these issues out, find solutions and move them forward rather than just trying to rush it through. Being more methodical, transparent, we can come up with the good answers.
Our next question is on the topic of immigration. President Trump's executive order places a temporary ban on immigrants from 7 predominantly Muslim countries. Congress recently approved funding to build a wall along our southern border, and more than 41,000 people were deported during the first 100 days of President Trump's time in office. Do you agree with President Trump's approach to enforcing immigration laws, and what should the next steps be on immigration reform? Chris Herod, you go first, 90 seconds.
Thank you. This is actually a topic I know very well. I've actually written a book on it. It's called The Forgotten Immigrant, How Tolerating Illegal Immigration Hurts Immigrants. I absolutely support President Trump on his plan to build a wall, and even the temporary, and we have to remember it's a temporary ban to make sure that we properly vet individuals. For me, when I served in the Utah legislature, I gave voice to those that didn't have a voice, the victims of illegal immigration. And they consist of primarily the middle class and the working poor that have seen a downward pressure on wages. It's actually legal immigrants that are trying desperately to bring their families here. And then the victims of illegal immigration crime. Recently, the U.S. District Attorney for Utah said that 40% of the crimes that they are pursuing are for illegal aliens. And so we have to get over this misnomer that illegal immigration is a victimless crime. Now, there are absolutely things that we can do. The Republican platform is very clear that it's against amnesty. But if you talk to illegal immigration or illegal immigrants, one of the biggest hurdles for people getting square with the law is that if you overstay a visa by 1 day, you're not eligible to come back for 3 years. If you overstay by 1 day or 1 year, you're not eligible to come back for 10 years. I would propose that we have, if somebody wants to come forward, they put up a bond. I'll have to get to it, my solution in my 30 seconds.
The question, 90 seconds to you, to John Cruz.
Thank you. Congress just appropriated $1.6 billion to secure our borders. That is the first step that we need to do and the most important step, and I'm pleased. I only hope the $1.6 billion will be spent on the best technology and the best methods, regardless of whether or not that's a wall. The second thing that we need to do is to be tough on criminals who have come here and have committed multiple crimes. There's no excuse for that, and we should have no sympathy for those criminals. The third thing that we need to do is reform our system so those good people waiting in line to come, who are needed by employers here, not only around the country, but particularly here in our state, are able to legally come into our country. And the fourth thing that we need to do is what I call restitution. Every act that we have in our society where somebody breaks the law, we show them how to make it right. And we need to do that with immigration as well. We need to show them how to make a wrong a right so they can get their lives back in order. Thank you.
And range, 90 seconds.
I think that the beginning of any good immigration policy is to secure the border. We just have to protect ourselves from those who would seek us harm, whether it's terrorist organizations or drug cartels that might seek to come through a porous border. So I agree, we have to secure it. We can use barriers, we can use technology, we can use more personnel, anything we have to do. We also need to enforce our laws. We cannot have millions of people living in the shadows. And another thing that we need is we need a strong legal immigration program. Right now we have a demand in our thriving economy here in the state of Utah for tens of thousands of engineers and other talented workers. And we have some of these people at our universities here in our very district. And when they have an opportunity to help work in our tech economy, we have to make it easier for them to get those visas and contribute.
A follow-up to this immigration question comes from someone, a Hamilton fan, A.Ham on Twitter, who asks, would you support cities and states' rights to become sanctuary cities? Start with you, Chris Herod.
You know, we cannot, and that's actually one of the major differences on up here. Provo City has become, its police chief said that it would not work with ICE on immigration issues. We cannot adopt sanctuary policies. And again, when that happens, then you encourage more people to come. It's simply not fair. I have a dozen neighbors that live in this town that are legal immigrants. Not one of them is in support of illegal immigration, and all of them, and the vast majority of them, have very strong opinions against illegal immigration.
Thank you. John Curtis.
There's at least 100 police officers who would be extremely offended if somebody said that Provo was a sanctuary city. When I came into office, Provo was a sanctuary city, and I worked my tail off to get it off that list. It wasn't easy to do. We instituted things like E-Verify and worked with ICE. I'm proud to say that we are not a sanctuary city, nor would we condone that here in Provo City.
Absolutely not on sanctuary cities, and that's it. So I guess I'll take 10 seconds to say, if you want to learn more, go to ainsforcongress.com, go to my Facebook page at Ains for Congress, and learn as much as you like.
Thank you. Our next question deals with foreign policy. Some have voiced concern that the United States has lost its position as the primary leader on the international stage. What role do you think the United States should play in world affairs? And John Curtis, you have 90 seconds.
Thank you. Among the many things on Trump's agenda that I support is his ability and his desire to retake that national stage and show leadership. I grew up in the United States where we had that leadership. I was proud of that my whole life, that we were a leader throughout the world. I'll support all of his efforts to do that. I believe, as Ronald Reagan did, that we get peace through strength. I want to be a good neighbor. I don't want our children to go to war, but we can't do that through weakness. Thank you.
Henry, 90 seconds.
There are so many evils in this world right now, and so many threats to our national security. There's never been a more important time for American strength throughout the world. We have dealing with Russia and their influence throughout the globe. Not only are they meddling in elections around the globe, but they are also pushing toward Europe with their aggressive natures, getting into Crimea and Ukraine, and now trying to back the Assad regime in Syria. This is a regime that's used chemical weapons. And we're dealing with Iran. This is a nation that has said that they want to eradicate Israel off of the map and kill Jews. We need to stand firm with Israel, our strongest ally. North Korea today launched another ICBM. This unstable leader, Kim Jong-un, is a major threat to world peace. We need to do everything that we can to stop him from increasing his capabilities.
Thank you.
Having spent 5.5 years of my life, this is one of the strengths that I bring to this conversation. I've taught at 2 different universities in the former Soviet Union. I understand who Putin is. Putin is a chess player, and unfortunately, he is a very good chess player. But unfortunately, we have Congress that has been distracted. Because as long as we talk about these accusations of collusion between Putin and President Trump, we're not talking about the real issues. We're not talking about healthcare reform. We're not talking about tax reform. And frankly, we're not even talking about Russia really has invaded Ukraine. But part of the problem that we have right now is I believe that we are overextended in the world. I think many people don't understand the Middle East. I've traveled to over 40 countries, Kazakhstan, Turkey, Azerbaijan, and the West Bank. We don't understand Islam, and we're in places that we shouldn't be. And when something happens like this that happened today, again, when 25% of our Air Force is not combat ready because we're over-stressed or over-allocated around the world, when a problem like North Korea rears its ugly head, I'm afraid that we're not going to be prepared. Our military men deserve, they're going to volunteer and risk their lives to have the absolute best equipment. And I will do everything that I can to support our military, but I'll use them as seldom as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you can start with Rebel for a question on Twitter. Anna Briner asks, should the U.S. play a role as an international leader in addressing climate change? And was abandoning Paris a good step? So we'll start with you, John Curtis. 30 seconds.
Okay, yes, it was a good step because it wasn't a good deal. And yes, we should show leadership, not just on climate change, on every issue. I want the United States to show leadership. I have confidence that President Trump will readdress the accord, that he'll make a deal that is good for us and for the entire world.
Thank you.
I think it's important that we are good stewards of our environment, but I support pulling out of the accords. And one basic reason is that if the president wants to enter into an agreement with foreign countries, it needs the ratification of the Senate. That is not something that the President of the United States can do on his own, and it was overextended and overcommitted, and not the goals of the American people.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
It's absolutely right to pull out. One of the things you get with me is actually I've written a number of op-eds. I actually have an op-ed on this issue on my website. But most people don't realize that the way that the world sees global climate change is that they're trying to use it to change structures. It's the greatest transfer of wealth. And so we must be very careful. I 100% support Trump pulling out of the Paris Accords.
Right, thank you.
Our next question, we'll get to something we touched on a little bit here, and that is the subject of Russia. According to a recent Hinckley Tribune poll, 49% of Utahns are somewhat or very concerned about Russian interference in the 2016 election. How concerned are you, and how should the U.S. respond to Russia? This is 90 seconds. The first response goes to Tanner H.
As I mentioned before, I'm very concerned about Russia. It reminds me of, in the 2012 election, when Governor Romney said that they were our #1 geopolitical foe. And he took a lot of criticism for that at the time, but he's proven to be right. Because again, they are extending their influence through aggression in Ukraine, Crimea, into Syria, and throughout the world, and into meddling in elections in Europe and even in our own country. It's concerning. I am thrilled that the Senate and the House overwhelmingly passed sanctions against Russia, Iran, and North Korea to punish this behavior. And I think that's the first step in the right direction.
Chris Barry, 90 seconds.
Right, I briefly addressed it. Again, you have to know what the real issue is. The collusion issue is, I've talked to some of our congressional delegation. Even Nancy Pelosi, Senator Dianne Feinstein said that there was no evidence of collusion between Russia and President Trump. So we have to separate that. And then you have to separate the involvement in the election. We have to realize that nations influence others. The first time that France tried to influence the 1800 election in favor of Thomas Jefferson, nations try to do that. But when it comes to actually trying to tamper with our voting machines, tamper in these things, those things absolutely. And it's a little frustrating to me that we weren't better prepared for many of those things. That cybersecurity is a major issue, and Russia is part of it. But at the same time, we have to realize that we've gotten information from Russia as well. They let us know about the Anina brothers, the Boston bombers. We need Russia's help to solve the problem in North Korea. And above all, we have to have open communication with Russia so that we're in a proxy war with Russia right now. And I'm concerned if we don't have any type of communication with Russia, that we're going to shoot down one of their planes, or they're going to shoot down one of our planes. And fortunately, when we shot down a Syrian plane, it wasn't a Russian pilot. So you have to take them seriously. Ronald Reagan said the only thing the Soviets understand is brute force, but you have to have continued open communication. Thank you.
I mentioned before what it was like growing up in the world, and we always were worried about Russia growing up. And when we sold shooting ranges around the world, the military used to have a target they called their Ivan target. That was a standard target, and they assumed that they were going to be shooting at Russians. But we never dreamed that it wouldn't be an invasion of men and tanks, that it would be a cyber attack. One of our most threatening challenges to us today as the United States is a cyber attack. And we need to be ready for it and prepared for it. Absolutely, sanctions on Russia are the appropriate thing to do. I also applaud the almost unanimous move by Congress to implement those sanctions. This is a country, we have to be tough with all of them. Thank you.
Tanner Inch, any rebuttal to the responses from the other candidates? No. Okay. Chris Hart?
No, well, I just want to make it clear that I do support the sanctions that are against Russia. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we have open communications so that we can solve the problems of North Korea. And actually, there's certain things that we can actually learn from the Russians on some of the things in the Middle East. And so we have to coordinate with them, but we need to be strong.
John Curtis, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think it would be important not to skip over the fact that right now as a country we are looking at President Trump's involvement. And I'm pleased actually that because it is in the hands of somebody who's qualified and talented, as a country we can move on and not worry about this and let the appropriate people judge this and tell us what we have. It might be a witch hunt and it might be real, and we need to let the appropriate people figure it out.
Our next question deals with religious freedom. Alan Clark on Twitter writes, what is the best method to defend religious freedom from a policy perspective? And I would add, how do you balance religious freedom with civil liberties? And John Curtis, you'll go first, 90 seconds.
Thank you. There are few instructions from our founding fathers as clear as the importance of religious freedoms. I value them. I will do everything I can to protect them. They are a large bedrock of our Constitution. We've seen them eroded and attacks on those religious freedoms, and we must be careful at all times. Now to answer your question about balance, religious freedom doesn't relieve us from our responsibility to be dignified and respectful and do all we can to respect other people's beliefs and feelings. It really comes down to mutual respect.
Thank you. Tanner Inch.
Freedom of religion is at the bedrock of our principles as America. It led people to leave other lands and to form this great country. We have to always remember it. It's our First Amendment. And it's also important for us to remember that that's not just for religions that are popular. We have to stand for minority religious groups at all times to protect this religious freedom. And it's also important that in today's landscape, we make sure that our religious organizations and religious individuals have the freedom to continue to follow their beliefs and their conscience, regardless of what the Supreme Court says or what other laws are passed in the land.
Many people forget the First Amendment. Some of the great rights in the First Amendment are religious rights, as well as freedom of the press and political rights. And I believe that those rights have been under attack many times through political correctness, through recent Supreme Court Supreme Court decisions. And that's actually one of the reasons that I ended up, even though I ran the Ted Cruz campaign here in the state of Utah and worked tirelessly for Ted Cruz, that's one of the reasons that I ended up supporting President Trump. Because that Supreme Court pick is so important. That's one of the big issues that took me to President Trump. If we would not have had President Trump in the office right now, we would have lost our religious rights, our gun rights, and many of the First Amendment rights. And so one of the most important things that we can do is to make sure that we elect in the presidential capacity those that fully understand the importance of our U.S. Constitution and specifically the Bill of Rights.
Follow-up on 30-second rebuttal. Any of the candidates have anything to add? Was 90 seconds not enough? It was enough. Okay, we'll move on to our next question.
The next question has to do with public lands. According to a recent Hinckley Tribune poll, 59% of Republicans think the newly designated Bears Ears National Monument is too big. Do you agree? And do you support the Bears Ears designation generally? That question first starts to you, Tanner Inch, 90 seconds.
It's absolutely too big. And it shouldn't have happened in the first place. I've spent time up with voters in San Juan County, and it completely affects their way of life. Universally, people there don't want their family traditions, their grazing rights, and other way of life interfered by this national monument. The Antiquities Act requires that if the federal government is going to do this, is supposed to take the smallest land possible, but instead they took 1.35 million acres. That's bigger than the state of Rhode Island. That's the size of Utah County. That's the size of all 5 national parks combined. So I'm glad that Secretary Hinckley came to visit and is reviewing the possibly rescinding that or reducing the size. And I also think that in the final resolution process, we should be seeking an exemption from the Antiquities Act. Wyoming got it, Alaska got it, and now with a Republican House, a Republican Senate, and a Republican President, I think it's time that Utah become exempted from this act, because enough is enough.
Chris Herring, 90 seconds.
Well, this is something I know a little bit about. In 2010, I passed a bill that reignited the public lands debate in this state that still continues to this day. I like to say that I was the first Wasatch Front legislator that fully understood what was happening to rural Utah. The Antiquities Act absolutely needs to be repealed, and as Tanner said, at the very least, Utah needs to be exempt. The problem you have is that Congress does not do a very good job managing those lands 2,200 miles away. It's a lot similar to when the United States actually became a nation. We didn't feel that Great Britain should rule over us, and that's what happens in the state. That's why I'm also proud, though, that this is not a new issue for me. This is why I've been endorsed by the 2 Republican commissioners in San Juan County, as well as one of the commissioners in Graham County, because I understand this. I'm not new to this. In 2009, I was out in Vernal when the 77 oil leases were pulled by the Obama administration. I saw 1,000 angry people. I didn't have a whole lot of empathy for the Undersecretary of Interior, but I did fear for his life. But that's what happens when somebody from way away dictates to what Utahns can do. We know how best to take care of our lands. It's absolutely offensive to think that we want to bring dirty water or breathe dirty air.
John Curtis, 90 seconds.
Nobody knows better than a mayor what it's like to have big, bad government come tell us what we should do with ourselves. Local control is always best. We do things better at a city level than any other level of government. Thank you. One of the highlights, thank you. One of the highlights of my campaign was hopping in an RV with some campaign members and driving down south. For 3 days, I got to put away the yuck of the campaign and all the distractions and just enjoy the beautiful country and the people down there. I came away with 3 resolves that I wanted to work on to improve the situation. The first is the problems with the Antiquities Act is it is one of the very few parts of government that has no counterbalance to it. It can be done unilaterally by one branch of the government. We rarely see that in our government. It needs to be updated so there's a corresponding confirmation by another elected body such as Congress. The second thing we need to do is revive the Public Lands Initiative. I've been impressed as I've studied this to see how much work was put into the Public Lands Initiative that came just this close to making all of this a viewpoint. I believe we need to revive it and find solutions so that that can be put together. And the third thing is if you study that Public Lands Initiative, you'll see that it had a Bears Ears Advisory Board. I advocate that this should be put together immediately and it should be given decision-making authority. Thank you.
As a rebuttal to each one of the candidates, some of you touched on the Public Lands Initiative that failed to pass. How do cities and states counteract the federal government coming in and designating this? And as a member of Congress, how will you balance urban and rural interests as it comes to these designations? Starting with you, Tanner H.
I think that it's important that the state play a bigger role. The state should be able to have management of the federal lands or revenue share opportunities. That's the way that we're going to be able to get energy exploration out of our federal lands and not have to deal with so much red tape in Washington, D.C.
This is a perfect example of what happens when you don't follow the Constitution. The Constitution specifically forbids the federal government from owning more than 10 miles square within a state. And if you go back and read the Constitutional Convention minutes, the reason that it was put in there is because the founders recognized that the federal government would have undue influence on a state. If ever there was a state in the Union that had undue influence by the federal government, it's the state of Utah.
Yes, the rural areas of this district represent just a small fraction of the population. Yet they need our time and attention as a congressman much more than we need it here in Utah County or Salt Lake County. It's clear to me that they need a disproportionate amount of time from the congressman selected to this area. They're likely not here tonight, and many of them won't see this, but I want them to know that I will be their advocate, and I will spend the time with them it needs to show them that they're represented in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Our next question deals with education. I anticipate similar themes in your responses, but what role should the federal government have in public ed? And Chris Herod, we'll go with you first, 90 seconds.
It's actually pretty simple. If it's not in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution, the federal government shouldn't be doing it. Education is not in Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution. So if the Department of Education needs to be eliminated, what you could do is block grant, cut the budget, cut their budget, give half of it to the deficit, and then you could block grant the rest of the states, and the states would end up having more money than they currently have. But as a legislator, it was absolutely frustrating when 6% of our education budget came from the federal government, and yet they gave us 100% of the rules. And so there should be absolutely no role in the federal government. And if you elect me, I will go back there. I will cut the Department of Education. I will try to get rid of all the mandates that come so that the state of Utah, because the state of Utah knows how to best educate our kids. Thank you.
John Curtis, 90 seconds.
I'm going to disagree with Chris, but only just slightly. Here is the role for the federal government in education. They should get on an airplane, they should come to Provo and see how we do it right here. And then take it to the rest of the country and show them that parents and local school districts know what's best for their kids, and they know what decisions should be made for them.
I think that you have to start at the smallest possible level, in the classroom. Nobody has a bigger influence on education for a child than great teachers. The first thing we need to have is great teachers. From there you go local level and state level. And at the K-12 level, we do not have a need for the federal government. As Chris said, just think about those funds and how they can be spent in our schools. But there are some interesting things happening at the federal government level in the post-secondary space. I had a chance to meet with the leadership of UVU recently, and I'm familiar with BYU's programs in the similar space as I studied international affairs there. And that is that our state has some unique advantages in providing the workforce to our intelligence agencies and our law enforcement agencies. And there's very unique partnerships that can be had here, where our students speak foreign languages and they have foreign cultural fluency, and they can pass background checks. And so this is a great opportunity for us to continue to build these partnerships with the federal government and supply that workforce that helps keep our country safe.
30 seconds on rebuttal. I guess I'll ask about the funding question. So a lot of school funding comes from the federal government. So if you want to get the feds out of education, what happens with the money part? So Chris Herod, 30 seconds.
Well, that's where I suggested that you could actually cut their budget in half, get rid of the Department of Education, and block grant that. Eventually, I would prefer never have to send the money back to Washington, D.C. and then beg for it to come back. So additionally, but in the meantime, we have become addicted as a state to some of that money. And so that's why you block grant it. But don't put the strings attached to it. Let us, as Utahns, decide how to best use that money.
Thank you. John Curtis, 30 seconds.
Thank you. Well, let me push back. Money doesn't come from federal government. Money comes from us. And we We send it to them. They take a lot of it and keep a lot of it, and then they send it back and tell us what to do with it. Let's just keep it here in Utah.
Again, at the post-secondary level, I think there are some funding issues. Right here, we have so many college students right in our district, and many of them rely on the Pell Grant program, which I think is a great program. It helps many get through school and finish their education. And sometimes there's a challenge with that because many universities don't have practical programs and people are graduating without skills and without employment. But our universities here are doing a great job of that, and so it's a program we can continue.
Our next question comes from Twitter, from Zach Clement, dealing with the perception of division in Washington, D.C. The question is, what will you do to bridge the divide between Republicans and Democrats in Congress? First question goes to you, John Curtis.
Thank you. I'm proud, as my record of mayor of Provo City for the last 8 years, we've dealt with difficult issues, often very divisive issues. Sometimes well and sometimes not as well. And I've learned through that the best way is to involve everybody. Everybody's opinion is important, and they all should have a seat at the table. As they do that, I find remarkably that we share about 80 or 90% common goals. And if we'll start on those common goals instead of the 5 or the 10% that we disagree on, it's amazing how we can make progress, and all of a sudden that 5 or that 10% becomes less significant and melts away. I believe that through my life as a businessman and as the mayor of Provo, we've been able to get significant things done, primarily because we've been able to work with people with very diverse opinions to find outstanding solutions.
We have good examples of working together. You just have to look at it issue by issue. As we talked about the sanctions that were passed recently, those had support. I think that the vote was 419 to 3. We also have, as I mentioned before, we can let the states, federalism and returning power to the states, that should not be a partisan issue. I hope that we can work together with more and more people in Congress across the aisle. I'm a little bit concerned about my opponent, John Curtis, because while I think it's important to work together, I don't think you actually have to switch sides. And John Curtis ran as a Democrat. He served as the Utah County chair for the Democrats. And he switched back and forth. He says his principles haven't changed. But I think it's important. What I'm going to do is I'm going to work hard to find solutions, and I'll work with anyone, but I'm going to stick to my conservative principles.
Part of it is, I don't think we're having honest communication in the nation right now. There are competing philosophies. And most of the people in this room believe in the founding principles of the U.S. Constitution. And yet it talks about self-evident truths. The problem is that the basics, it's only self-evident if the basics have been taught. And one of the things that I have been running on, I believe very strongly that we need education. And you saw it again last night in the healthcare debate. Certain Republicans even don't understand how bad socialized medicine is. And so one of the things that I think the way that you reach across the aisle is you teach those certain principles that have made this country greater. Again, for me, it's very easy. I don't think it's enough to simply vote right. I want to go out, and if you go back there, whenever I'm given a platform, I'll tell people that socialized medicine does not work. I was there when the Soviet Union collapsed. Socialism robs the individual of their full potential. It eventually it weakens a family, and it eventually morally bankrupts the society. But when Nancy Pelosi laughs at somebody when they're asked, well, what constitutional authority do you have to do that bill? That's a problem. And so we need to go out, all of us do, and to educate on what the U.S. Constitution has done for us. That's one of the reasons we've been passed out over 10,000 constitutions this election cycle. Thank you.
As a follow-up, if one of you are ultimately elected to be in the House of Representatives, you will fill the shoes of someone who is very aggressive in the check and balance of the current system. and Congressman Chaffetz. Since you would represent the same party as the President of the United States, in what way what do you see your job being to be a check on the current administration? John Curtis? This is the rebuttal.
Thank you. Yes, and clearly I'd like to answer those comments. My entire life, I've fought for liberty, personal responsibility, accountability, and family values. Like Jason Chaffetz, like Ronald Reagan, and Donald Trump, I once had a fling on the dark side. That was 20 years ago, and I've never looked back. Some people will never forgive me for that, and that's just something I have to say.
Thank you.
I think it's important. I believe in conversion. I believe you can change your principles over time. Ronald Reagan converted to the Republican Party, which was a great victory. But Mayor Curtis has continued to say that his principles have never changed when he was in the Democrat Party or when he was in the Republican Party. And to me, that only means that you could just as easily be in either party. And so what I'm going to do is fight as a conservative to cut spending, to cut taxes, and reduce the national debt.
And on this, I think it's important to back up Canada.
Thank you, Chris.
Because to me, that's the frustration. And somebody that has been a conservative while I served and gotten beat up because I'm conservative. The BRT is not conservative. You look at what a $190 million project with $75 million of free money. I gathered signatures to try to get that on. We weren't allowed to have a vote as a state. And so I am concerned that when people say that they're conservative, but their actions are not, it is a problem.
The question was separation of powers and a check on the current administration. I would love for you to address that. So I will give you a second chance. 90 seconds, Tanner H.
Separation of powers are incredibly important. Right now, we have a federal government that not only has grown to be way too big and it has grown out of its constitutional enumerated rights, but it has also shifted so much power to the executive branch. And one way that we do this is by delegating rulemaking authority. Congress passes laws, they're supposed to create all the rules, but now they're just passing it at a high level and delegating it to an agency like the EPA to make up ridiculous rules. And it's an unelected bureaucrat who makes those rules, and they're not accountable to voters. One example of that is they set out a new rule that caps ozone emissions at a level that's lower than the naturally occurring level. Without any fossil fuel, without any manufacturing, you're already out of compliance. It makes no sense at all. And in the current context that you're asking about, I think it's important that we have special counsel. That allows things to be calmed down a little bit. Let special counsel Mueller do his job, and let's let everyone else in Congress get back to their job. Reduce taxes, reduce spending, reduce the national debt, repeal and replace Obamacare. Let's get our government actually working to do the things they were elected to do.
90 seconds.
You know, this is one of the things that I think was one of my strengths, because everybody talks about what they're going to do. I've actually done these things. I started a state sovereignty movement where we reignited the public lands and the Constitution. My only oath is not to any individual. My only oath is to the U.S. Constitution. One of my greatest honors I've ever had in my life is when I served in the Utah legislature and raised my hand to protect the Utah and U.S. Constitutions. I've done that. But it's also important that many of the problems that we have is because we're out of whack with the Constitution. Way too much power is given to the federal government, as Tanner talked about. Way too much power has been given from the legislative branch to the executive branch. That needs to be clawed back. That's why I support the RAIN Act, which is making sure that if anything has more than $100 million impact on the economy, it has to be voted on by Congress. One of the sponsors of that is Senator Rand Paul. Fortunately, I've been endorsed by Senator Rand Paul because he knows what I have done here in the state I have a record of doing that, and I promise you that if you elect me, I will continue to keep that same platform and continue to do the same thing. Thank you.
Oh, is it my turn? Sorry.
No, it's
Got
my turn.
distracted by all of these tweets. Sorry about that. We will go next to
I haven't had a chance.
John Curtis.
Yes.
Yes.
So I really want to answer your question, but I also really want to answer the charges made by my opponent. Let me just share with you an email that came to me today. Chris voted for SB 223, the omnibus tax bill, which raised and lowered various taxes, including increasing the rate on the second quarter from 0.25 to 0.30. In 2008, he voted for SB 245, a quarter-cent sales tax for roads, transit, and airports. It allowed for the tax to go into effect without a vote of the public. It helped fund I-15, but it also funded BRT.
It's true, I'm the only candidate who's never raised taxes and who never will.
Tanner, we are so proud of you. I'll be good.
Do we get our rebuttals?
Yes, although... Yes, okay, fine. Tanner, 30 seconds.
Oh, I already get mine.
Oh, you did? Preserve.
You know, recently I was accused of raising property tax. I actually have that bill here in my hand. I'm happy to talk to anybody about it. I was recently accused of funding the stadium. I have that bill right here that shows that I did not. This is kind of the problem, you know, but you look at it. I've been beaten up because I'm too conservative, and now people are saying that I voted for these tax increases. BRT is an absolutely terrible deal.
Time. Thank you.
We have time for one more question. And this comes from Emily W. on Twitter. It says, if you are elected, will you hold town halls? If so, how will you accept dissenting opinions that are often found in these? And how will you interact with concerned constituents or paid protesters? This question first goes to...
I think it's so important as a representative to know what your constituents, what's on their mind, what's affecting them. So I will hold public town halls and meet with voters, share with them the experiences that I'm having in Washington, D.C., and also hear from them. And I think it's important that you take that and then you vote for what your district really wants. This is why I haven't pledged to be a member of any caucus, because the people that I want to report to are the people of this 3rd district. Their concerns are my concerns. And this district has so many special things going for it that it needs to have a special voice in Washington, D.C. We have the #1 state for business. We have the most 2-parent families. We lead the nation in charitable donations, volunteerism. I'm so impressed every time I meet with voters. Let me give you an example as well. I from time to time talk about entitlement reform and the way we need to preserve and strengthen Social Security and Medicare, even though that's very politically unpopular. And sometimes I will have people who are on those programs who will call me and say, Tanner, keep talking about these issues. People think it's only about us, it's about our grandkids. It's about the future generation. And I love hearing those. I want to have as much time as I possibly can with the members of this district.
You know, this is one of the things that I think is one of my strengths, is people, I am who I am. You may not like every opinion, but I'm going to let you know where I stand. I'm greatly concerned, though, when people, the only way that we can have a big party in the or a big tent Republican Party is that if people come forward and tell how they really believe, then you can have that open discussion. I might learn from them, or they might learn from us. But when we say things and say who we don't say who we truly are, I'm a platform Republican. You look at the Utah Republican platform, I believe in every one of those parts, including immigration. And so for me, it's frustrating when we come and we all try to be the same. It's okay if we're different. But the only way you have the best ideas rise to the top is if we're open and tell how we really feel. Town halls are absolutely important. I actually like some of that pushing. At one time I was ranked #1 in the nation for fencing. I like that back and forth. There's something about that pushing forward, and I wish we would actually have more of that here. Where they can hit and you can hit, because I think that's where you learn. But part of the problem we have, again, what I'm concerned about in the Republican Party, is that everybody says they believe in the platform, and then they don't go back and actually do that. I have a record of voting the way that I say that I'm going to believe. Thank you.
John Curtis, 90 seconds.
Thank you. You don't get a 94% approval rating without being with the people in their homes, in their town hall meetings, and wherever they are. I love the people of Provo, and I have loved meeting them wherever they want to meet. I'll not only do town hall meetings, I'll reinvent town hall meetings. Every aspect of constituent outreach, I will love every bit of it. In 2015, I was awarded the top elected official on social media. There are so many channels, so many ways to reach out to residents. One of my favorite compliments is when somebody walks up to me and they say, I've never met you, but I feel like I know you. You know that you're reaching out and you're doing a good job when that happens. I look forward to it. Thank you.
For our 30-second rebuttal, this question is tied to that, and because it's a compressed in 30 seconds, it gets really hard. But we're trying to prepare voters right now as well. There are a lot of similarities. There's some differences to identify today. But as part of the rebuttal in 30 seconds, I'd like you to identify what you think the biggest difference is between you and your opponents on the stage today, starting with Tanner Ainge.
I've already pointed out that I'm a lifelong Republican, and one of my opponents is not. He also was just mentioning that he felt like the voters of Provo knew him. And one of the reasons is that he dramatically increased spending on social media and outreach as mayor. And that was just one small component of the 40% increase in spending that happened while he was mayor. I am going to cut spending. I come from the business world. I have looked through hundreds of companies' financial statements and gone line by line to identify waste, and that's what I'm going to do in Congress.
I was first elected at the age of 18 in the Republican Party, and I have served this party. Not in always, I served 6 years in the House, which people see as a glorious position, but I've also done the hard work, the precinct chair, the state delegate. The thing that separates me is I do have a conservative record. I'm also the one that has the international experience, and I've also been willing to take the tough stands and let you know how I truly believe. Thank you.
So I guess I'm prepared to stand before the residents of Provo and ask for their permission for all the money we have spent on social media. Facebook's free, blogs are free. It doesn't cost very much money, and it's been incredibly powerful. I would say the biggest difference between me and my opponents is my experience. I've enjoyed a fabulous business career, the opportunity to be successful in the business world. I've enjoyed what's been almost a magical experience as the mayor of Provo, and accomplished some things that none of us thought were even possible.
This time.
More fireworks, but you still have a closing statement. So, with that, we'll start with closing statements. 1 minute. John Curtis, you'll go first.
Thank you. I have been pretty stressed out about this event, and the first thing I would like to do is, as I looked around, I'm just so touched by all of you that are here, good friends who generally pay no attention to politics. Thank you for being here. This has been an interesting time. And I promised myself, as soon as this is over, I feel like, by the way, like I'm in this wind tunnel and all of this yuck just keeps flying at me every time I get the mail or turn on the radio or turn on the TV. My wife won't even turn on either the radio or the TV anymore. So I tell you what I'm going to do about it. When this is done, I'm going to walk out on Center Street and I'm going to go to one of the dozens of places to get a fabulous ice cream cone, and I'm going to get an ice cream cone. And I hope all of you will join me. And while you're out there, do me a favor. Ask the businesses of Provo how they feel about the last 8 years. Ask Ask the business of Provo if they feel like they've had burdensome regulation or burdensome taxes, or on the other hand, if Provo City's been a friend to them and helping them be successful. Thank you for being here tonight.
Right now, we have no voice in Congress. For the next 5 months, as that seat remains empty, every day our national debt will increase by more than $2 billion. We will have no voice when the debt ceiling discussion comes up. We'll have no voice on other critical issues. I promise you that if you trust me with your vote, your voice will be heard in Washington, D.C. I will never back down from the urgent priorities of cutting spending and reducing our national debt so that it doesn't be stuck with the next generation. God raised up this country to be a banner of freedom to the rest of the world. Our bravest men and women have died to protect it. We cannot let it slip, our America's greatness slip away just because of our lack of resolve or lack of commitment to our core principles. I'm asking for your vote, and I will not let you down.
Ladies and gentlemen, we need to be honest. Our country is under attack, not only from abroad, but also from within, because we have competing philosophies. I have a record of talking about the Constitution and following the constitutional principles. That document has made this country what it is, but I fear that we're losing that. I'm the only one in this experience, out of the three of us, that have the international experience to know what is a real threat and what's not a real threat. What we need to do about Islam and what we don't need to do about Islam. Where we need to be involved and not. I'm also the only one that has a proven conservative record. And I promise you that if you send me back, I will do the same things back in D.C. that I did here in Utah. I will represent you and defend the Constitution. God bless the great sovereign state of Utah and the United States of America. My name is Chris Herod. Please vote for me. Thank you.
Well, sadly, that concludes our debate for this evening. At least mostly sad for us on this side of the aisle. Please join me in the room in thanking our candidates for spending their time this evening.